you got to ask yourself, what are you doing today that is different from what you were doing 6 months ago?
All right, it is Thursday, January 17th. This is the Token CEO podcast. I'm Erika. I'm the CEO of Barstool Sports. We talk about a whole bunch of random things on here, including work, what it's like to be at work, how to succeed at work, life at Barstool Sports, work at Barstool Sports, you name it. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, you can just go to YouTube, look up Token CEO and subscribe. You can buy our merch at the Barstool Sports store. You can give us a rating or a review. And I think that, or you could just listen and watch this. Like, we're just appreciative of that. We pre-recorded some of this from the Arizona Bowl. I was on a tear at the Arizona Bowl. I was like, I'm in hair and makeup and look nothing like myself. I'm going to bang out as many Q&As as humanly possible, because I did notice in December I looked like absolute shit on this thing. So I was like, maybe when I'm looking a little better than usual, I actually want to asterisk that, but maybe when I'm looking a little bit better than usual, I'll try to be professional on camera and answer questions in the best way I know how. Speaking of doing things in the best way you know how, Omega Accounting Solutions is our partner. They help small businesses doing their best by helping them understand all the tax credits that they're eligible for, and also just how to get their shit together in their finances and accounting. So if you have a small business, you have questions about accounting, you have questions about the rules and regulations of tax law, you have a question about tax credits, Omega Accounting Solutions is a great partner for you. There's this little small thing called the Employee Retention Credit. It can give you up to $26,000 per employee if you employed people during COVID. So go find out for yourself at 1-800-300-9ERC. That's 1-800-300-9ERC. Or visit omegataxcredits.com/Barstool Sports. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about. I have been on a tear. I used to have this I've been made aware that I have this bad quality when I'm on a plane. I think Daniela calls it like tarmac Erika, where I just am like, here's all the shit I want people to do. Gotten some feedback that people don't like that. So instead, I've used my plane time, which is where my brain is firing like 1,000 things. I've taken to writing, working on a bunch of writing projects. So I've been thinking a lot, I've been working on a lot, I've been writing a lot, and we have that to share with you.
What we're going to do today for this episode, first is we're going to go through what I think we're going to call these Tim's 2 questions. So these are what I think are the 2 questions that everybody should be asking themselves going into January, going into first quarter, going into 2023. The second thing we're going to do is talk about figuring your shit out. So as a quick side note, small promo, if you need a date book to help you figure your shit out, here's one that says get shit done, because just can never say the word shit enough. You can find it in the Barstool Sports store. I use it to help me get organized, figure out what my goals are, figure out where I'm going to be, figure out what my schedule looks like. You can get this too and use it to help you get organized. So we're going to have a section on figuring your shit out. We're going to have another topic around making the moment. Okay, so first thing we're doing is 2 questions. So these come from Tim. Tim's our camp counselor. Tim is helping me get my act together, figure out what I want our management team to look like, what our structure should look like, what our cadence should be, how we put the right people in the right roles at the right time, who we should push, how we think about transitioning people, who we need to give up on, where we need to transform, all this kind of stuff. But the 2 questions, one is from Tim and one is from me. The 2 questions are really about what is it you need to be asking yourself as you think about your job, your life, where you are in the world, and what you're doing. So the first question is, what are you doing right now that's different from what you were doing 6 months ago? So one of the things that I think happens at work is you kind of get stuck in this rut where you're doing legitimately the same thing you were doing 1 month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, all the way back to 6 months ago. So if you are interested in progression and you're interested in moving your career forward, moving your life forward, moving your health forward, moving your relationships forward, you got to ask yourself, what are you doing today that is different from what you were doing 6 months ago? So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is, what do you want to be doing 6 months from now that's different from what you're doing today? So this originated from Tim. I added to it, but I think what's what's good about it is you can ask the question of, how am I evolving? Like, what am I doing that's different from what I used to do? Am I taking on more responsibility? Am I figuring out a relationship that's been hindering my progress or my happiness? Am I working through something to learn new skills, to push myself, to go to new places? And if the answer is you're doing the same thing today that you were doing 6 months ago, you're probably not progressing. So, and then I think the second thing is it's a great way to set up what you want to be doing. Where do you want to move to? You got to call your own ball. We're in the middle of a football stadium right now. Perfect analogy for us, but how do you call the ball on where you want to be in 6 months? So for me personally, I went through these because I think it would be kind of lame to say them and not share them. So what am I doing now that's different than what I was doing 6 months ago? I think the biggest thing is 6 months ago, I was working in the business and not on the business. So we talk about this a lot at Barstool, which is, are you working to make the business better, or are you just toiling in the day-to-day crisis, drama, chaos that is existing in the business? So one thing that I feel like I've been able to do, or that I'm working hard at, is working on the business, not in the business. I think the second thing, which is all the Barstool people know this, is we're really focused on budgeting and accountability. So for the first time, I don't know why we never did this, but for the first time, people will have budgets. They'll be accountable to their budgets. They'll be empowered to manage those budgets, but they're going to have to deliver the results against them. So that's creating a whole bunch of, if you were a fly inside a Barstool right now, there's creating a lot of tension because some people are like, I have a fixed budget. We tend to, year over year, spend more on things, to do things differently. We very rarely do the same thing twice, which makes a budgeting process hard, which is probably why we've never done one. But now with the ownership of Penn on the horizon, we need to become more disciplined about how we're outlining our budgets and how we're accountable to our budget. So I feel like that's a progression I've made from 6 months ago. Third thing I'm trying to do is coaching versus doing things myself. This is tough for me. I like to do things myself. I want to figure out the problem. I want to work with the person closest to that problem. I want to be hands-on. I want a lot of control. I'm trying to step back from that. A good example is like, I'm dying to coach Hank. Like, one of my goals for the next 6 months, which I'll get into in a second, is how do I help work with someone like Hank, who's super talented, who's very capable, who's going to do incredible things for our Chicago operation. How do I help Hank take his career to the next level? I'm spending more time writing and thinking than I have. And I think I'm getting closer to the bottom of things, if that makes sense. So being less superficial. So those are things, when I look back 6 months ago to today, those are things that I'm personally trying to do a better job of and that I think I've made progress on. 6 months from now, I want to have 2 strong, sizable creative projects. So like, I really want 2 things that I can really sink my teeth into that are creative and that help Barstool. I want to be planning for 2024, not in January of 2024, which is typically how we've done it, but in June of 2023. I want to spend more time externally and learning. And I want to create a durable framework for how we do things and be following it. So for me, that's the 2 questions section. Those are examples of what I'm working on. Yours are probably better. But I think it's a great way to think about where you are, the progress you want to make, where you want to get to. All right. So second thing we're talking about is figuring your shit out. So when it comes to figuring your shit out, I think there's a couple core things that everyone should think about as they go into a new year. One is, where are you? Like, where are you in your relationships? Where are you in your work? Where are you with your health? Where are you with your family? Where are you with your job? Where are you with your money? Like, all sorts of stuff. And we'll talk about this a lot in the weeks to come. But I think a really good question for people to ask is, where am I? Like, where am I, and do I like where I am, right? Am I happy? And the answer isn't really unilateral. You may be happy about some things and unhappy about other things. Frankly, I think that's kind of how it is. I feel very happy right now. I feel miserable about my body and my health. So it's like, you can be happy in some places that can cause you to be unhappy in other places. But I think a really good exercise for anyone who wants to have progress and who wants to make change, a really good thing to do is to understand where you are. I think it's also okay to be lost. And I think that people don't talk about this enough, which is I think it's okay to understand where you are, but not be ready to do something about it. And I especially think this is true if you're at the beginning of your career, or you're making a change, or you're uncertain about a relationship, or you just don't want to face the music. I think it's okay to not make the decision to face the music, but you should know what the music is. So I think another really good exercise for January and just for a new year is to start to understand where you are and then how you want to manage it. So figure out your work situation, figure out your personal situation. Be honest about where you are in all of them. You may not want to do something about it, but at least acknowledging it will help you think about it and think about it critically and honestly. I think the other thing that's good about this is you can be clear about where you want to go. So I think half of this is just understanding where you are. I think that also allows you to think about where you want to go and how you want to get there. So even if you're not ready yet, you can start to envision what something different might look like. You understand where you'd like to be, and then you can give yourself the free space and the time to think about how you might want to get there. And then when you're ready to make the move, you've already thought about it. In talking about figuring your shit out, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is how you manage your moment, how you understand the moment that you're in. And I think one of the things that's so hard for people is, or at least it's hard for me, I can only speak for myself, but is that nobody understands really the moment that you're in. And I don't know about anybody listening to this, but I almost feel like it reveals too much, it's too personal, and it takes too much time to sometimes explain that moment to somebody else. One, they won't understand it. Two, you've got to divulge more than maybe you wanted to. Three, it's something you're uncomfortable about. Or it's something as I get older, I feel more and more private, where I'm I just want to work through my problems in my way, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But the thing I was thinking about is there's really three types of moments for me anyways. One is that there's a moment you have to manage. So there's something happened. It could be, it's in this context, it's not a great thing. So, you could be struggling at work. You could be getting divorced. You could be having a relationship issue. You could have a health issue. You could have a parent with a health issue. You could have financial troubles. You could have depression. There's something happening which has you stuck in a moment. This actually, small non sequiturs. I used to live in Somerville, and we lived in this duplex behind the Rosebud Diner, and it was me and my best friend and a whole bunch of girls. And whenever I was kind of depressed because my relationships weren't working, or I was stressed about work or whatever I was stressed about at the time, I was stressed about everything. I listened to U2 Stuck in a Moment on decibel 11 on repeat for a day and a half. I remember our neighbor Susan coming upstairs and being is everything all right? I felt so bad. Literally the fucking song was on repeat. But that's what makes me think about this. But if you're stuck in a moment, sometimes that can seem really overwhelming, and it can almost make it worse. And I think a good way, at least for me, to help manage a moment is to feel productive in it. What do you need to do to get through this? What are the things that you have to take care of every day? You've got to make time for doctor's appointments. You've got to make time to sleep or rest. You've got to make time to take your medication or your vitamins. You've got to make time to care for someone else. How do you make a list of all those things that you have to do, and also make a list of the things that just keep you sane? For some people, it's seeing friends. For some people, it's being able to go to work. For some people, it's exercising. So one thing I think that is, as I think about going into a new year, it's understanding, not just working to figure things out and understanding where I am or where you are. It's also about like what kind of moment you're in. Like sometimes you're in a moment to be managed. I feel like I've spent the last 2 years in a moment that had to be managed. I also think there's a moment where sometimes you need to marinate in it and marinate in things. And for me, what that means is like you've maybe made a big change, or you've taken something on, or you've gotten something out of your life, or you've changed the way you're doing things or approaching things, or you're trying to change how you're doing things. And once you set about that change, you kind of got to let it sit for a little bit, and you got to see if it works. And sometimes I feel like people can feel a lot of pressure, like they've constantly got to be moving and constantly got to be progressing and constantly have to be changing. But the reality is sometimes you set about some change and you got to get used to the change so that the change sticks. And I think it's totally acceptable to have a moment that you've just got to marinate in for a little bit and to acknowledge to yourself, hey, I've made a change and I'm going to sit with that change for a little bit and then decide, do I like it? Was it good? Is it bad? Are there things I would tweak? Are there things I would do differently? And then the last is like, very often in your life, you're in a great moment. And how is it that you're making the most of that moment so that moment continues? Is it investing in a relationship? Is it investing in yourself? Is it investing in your future? Acknowledging that you're in a good moment, it can also be really, really important. One, so that you recognize what it feels like and it doesn't like pass you by and then it's gone. But the second thing is that you can try to keep it going for as long as possible. So I think those are also things you can do to think about where you are and how you want to get through it, or how you want to remember it, or what you want to come from it. I think the last thing just on figuring your shit out is you could ask yourself a couple questions. So like, and honestly, like I don't have any of these answers, so I just want to state that but this is what I'm trying to do in my work and in my life to help me be as happy as possible, as productive as possible, as fulfilled as possible. So things that I'm asking myself are like, what habits do I want to start, right? What are things that I want to get back to doing? Like I used to play hockey all the time. I haven't played hockey in a year and a half. Do I want to get back to playing hockey? Did that make me happy? Was that good for me? Was that a productive part of my life? I think a lot of times people feel like there's something from their past that they did that made them really happy, but they've lost track of being in touch with it, or lost the motivation to get back to doing it. So I think that's a good thing. I think it's also great to outline, where do you need discipline? Like, where do you need discipline? I need discipline in a whole bunch of areas. But I think sometimes just saying to yourself, like, where do you need discipline? I need discipline waking up early and exercising every day. I need discipline not spending 17 hours a day on Slack. Those are the places where I need more discipline and self-control, and I want to outline them so that I can better manage them. And then I also think it's great to be like, what do you want to get better at? Like, how do you want to be a better manager? How do you want to be a better boss? How do you want to be a better partner, a better parent, a better family member, a better friend? And really just laying those things out, laying those things out, I think can have a really lasting impact on how you do things. I think everybody's going to come into January and be like, I'm going to lose 20 pounds and all of a sudden I'm going to start doing this every day and I'm going to take these great habits and keep them. The answer is you're probably not, but if you at least start by acknowledging where you are and where you want to be, you can give yourself a great shot at working to get there when you're ready to get there.
So, all right, now we're on to the Q&A. While I'm going to flash to my former self in Arizona, I'm going to have a near beer here back in New York. Athletic Brewing Light. They've got all sorts of different flavors. It tastes great. It smells like a beer, which I appreciate. I love the smell of a beer. Do you love the smell of a beer? I love the smell of a beer, except like the morning after when you go to the bar and you're like, oh God, or you're like in a frat house at Ohio State, which is really just my nightmare. But anyways, if you're trying to not drink during January, or you're trying to drink less alcohol, Athletic Brewing is a great option for you. They've got a whole bunch of flavors. It smells great. It tastes great. It satiates whatever you're looking for from an alcoholic drink. So long story short, it's January. You're trying to work out more. You're trying to have less calories. You're trying to get your life organized. You're trying to be great at work. Give dry a try. Go to athleticbrewing.com and you can get 20% off your first order, I think of 2 6-packs, if you use code TOKENCEO. So give dry a try this January.
All right. This question is as follows. I was approached by a local company by a VP I've always respected and have had a good relationship with for years. I enjoy my current company, my bosses, and they claim to see potential in me. But every growth opportunity is pushed off and never discussed, just a someday promise. How can I use this job offer to see if they're serious about some development plan? I don't want to talk about it anymore or wait too long and realize that their actions and words do not line up. Okay, so one, credit to you for maintaining relationships with high-level people in other companies. Super smart. Also credit to you for recognizing that the actions and the words of your current company don't add up already. So this isn't something that's going to happen in the future. This is something that is happening to you right now. You're being promised development, opportunity, raises, promotions, advancement, responsibility, whatever, and then it never shows up. I think one thing you might want to think about is if you would seriously consider working for that vice president at that other company, then go pursue the job. If you wouldn't seriously consider it, then you got to be a little bit careful. But I would 100%, if you have integrity in pursuing the opportunity, go check it out. I think at that point, you can come back to your current company and say, I have another offer. Here's what I like about it. Here's how it moves me forward. Here's how it delivers what I'm interested in. I've loved working here, but I've really found that I have not been able to advance and grow the way I need to. I think if you are not interested in taking the job with this other VP, you should politely share that with that person as quickly as possible so that you don't lead them on. What I would then do in your company is say, hey, I've been approached by another company. I wasn't looking for a job. I'm not interested in finding another job, but I am going to, it did perk my interest in understanding what I could do elsewhere. Then what I would say is, hey, I would actually like to stay here and I don't really want to engage in any conversations with anyone anywhere. But in order to do that, we've talked a lot about my career growth. We've talked a lot about more opportunities. We've talked a lot about more responsibilities, whatever you've talked about. And I need to see those things happen for me to feel like this is a company that's invested in me the way I'm invested in it. And then I would see how that goes. What I would not do is go pursue this company with no intention of taking the job, or to use this to throw in the face of your current company and then have them be like, okay, go take it. And then you didn't want to take it. So just be a little bit careful with how you play the politics of it. But I think it's a great opportunity. It's a huge credit to you. And you should either get new opportunity and growth at your current company, or you should go find and see if this other company is for you. This question is, I inherited an employee when I started at my company over 3 years ago. He's 20 years older than me, hates change, and only has committed to the bare minimum. Ugh, this guy sounds like he sucks. I've tried to have constructive conversations to get a better work product and to help him understand the efficiencies we're getting by changing our processes, and I'm constantly met with combativeness and disinterest. I relate to this. I understand what you're talking about. I end up redoing a lot of his work because it's beyond sloppy and it's impossible to follow. Our company is unique in that people rarely get let go. I've heard of less than 3 firings in 30 years of its existence. So I'm basically stuck with him unless he does something completely out of line. How can I best deal with what I've got? How can I make a man who's checked out actually give a shit and do what I ask? Oof. Okay. What I would say is this guy is not going to do what you ask. So he doesn't give a shit about you. He doesn't like change. He's set in his ways, and he's clearly a little bit aggressive or angry about it and unlikely to change in the future. I think it's a problem in your company that nobody leaves. We don't tend to fire a lot of people. We've gotten better at it over time. But the reality is that there's probably a really capable person who wants that job, who would be motivated for that job, and who would do good work. So I think the chances of you reforming this guy are slim to none. And I would also call out that's not a great look for your company that nobody gets fired. I think for you, I think you should just be straight up with him, which is, look, I find you combative. I've tried to make you understand and appreciate the change that we're making. I've worked to help you buy into this system. I've found you reticent and incapable of doing all three of those things. I would also say I end up spending a lot of my time redoing your work, which is inefficient and not productive for me, and I don't appreciate it. And then I would honestly, if you can get the support of, if you have an HR team or if you can get the support of your boss or whoever runs the company, I would say, like, I'm going to give you 3 months to turn it around and contribute and participate and to be productive and positive, or you have to go. The big question and more so the battle you need to fight is with the boss, not with this guy. Because if your boss doesn't support you in doing that, he's basically saying that he accepts, or he or she is basically saying that they accept mediocre talent whose work product isn't that good and whose attitude is even worse. This question is, how do you handle meetings that consistently go over the scheduled time? Oh my God, this drives me nuts. I hate when meetings go over the scheduled time. I have this like anxiety that kicks in like at the 57-minute mark where if like we're not wrapping up and being done, I'm like, so one is this, when I was at AOL, this happened all the time. Like meetings would just start late, end late, run long. Like it was just so annoying. It was also so disrespectful. It's like a not well-run culture when everybody's late all the time, because then everybody's apologizing to one another, or you're frankly just sitting around wasting time, which I think is a lot of what happens at big companies, and it sucks. So the first thing I would do is make sure all of your meetings start on time and end on time. So if you run a meeting or your team has meetings, I would make sure you start the meeting on purpose, even if everybody isn't in there yet. I do this a lot at Barstool where I'm like, my time matters. I want to be efficient. I want to make the most of it. So at 10 o'clock, if the meeting starts at 10, we're starting the meeting at 10. It sends a really good signal to people if they're not in the room yet. It's embarrassing and it just doesn't feel good. So the next meeting, they'll show up at 10 o'clock. The second thing is I would make sure that at the 50-minute mark, if the meeting is an hour, or 20-minute mark, if the meeting is a half hour, that you're like, okay, what are the next steps coming out of this? Like, let's start to begin the wrap. Or if the conversation merits a longer, or if the meeting merits a longer conversation, the meeting isn't going to be done yet, say, all right, let's wrap up what we've got to thus far, and we're going to set a follow-up meeting to finish this conversation. The reality is, no meeting really needs to be more than 30 minutes. Like if you can't get out if you can't make a conversation and an action plan happen in 30 minutes, your company has bigger problems. Obviously, creative conversations can flow and they can last a really long time. But overall, I would say culturally, have the change start with you and with your team. Make the point of starting on time. Make the point of wrapping a little bit early. And then also share the feedback, which is, look, the more meetings that run long, the more inefficient we're being, the more disrespectful of people's time we're being, the less productive and fulfilling working at this company will be.
So, all right. So thank you for listening to this episode. Hopefully that advice or perspective was helpful depending on where you see yourself, where you want to be in 6 months and where you were 6 months ago. Hopefully the Q&As were interesting. I love Q&As. But mostly thank you for listening, and we will see you back here next week.